In this video sequence, we are going to look at some aspects of what we call dialogue scripting. In the previous video, we saw how we could automatically disable an irrelevant variable or question in the interview simply by checking a box in component file properties. Here we're going to look at an alternative method of disabling an irrelevant variable or question. And we're going to use as our example this paragraph here, which has some if logic around it. And then within that paragraph, there is a variable field for the separation date. I'm going to start a test assembly, and I'm going to go to the dialog that contains the question, the yes/no question or true/false variable that serves as the basis for that if logic. And then here is the answer field for the separation date. But notice it doesn't matter whether I click on yes or no here, the separation date answer field is still available to me. Ideally, as a best practice, we don't want to have this question or this answer field available to a user if it is not relevant, if it's not going to go anywhere in the assembled document, which would be the case here if I answered this question no. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the dialog editor for this marriage information dialog. I can do so simply by right-clicking on it here in this test assembly interview. And I'm going to select edit component off that right click. And then you'll see within the dialog editor there is a script tab. I'm going to click on that and it opens this script window. This is where I'm going to formulate the script that I want HotDocs to process for this dialog in the interview. Now, we are going to start out by disabling that separation date variable. And we can do so a couple of different ways. Here in the instruction models box, you'll see that there is a gray instruction, actually a couple of different instructions, one to gray out everything in a dialog, one to gray out an individual variable, and then corresponding hide instructions. I'm going to go ahead and use gray in this situation, although you could very well use hide if you so choose, but I'm going to go ahead and drag this model into the script box. You'll see now that VAR, which stands for variable, is here in red. We need to replace that with an actual variable, and I'm simply going to do a drag and drop of the separation date variable from this list down here in the bottom left hand corner, and I'm going to drop it on that variable placeholder. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is tell HotDocs the condition under which I want this variable to be ungrayed in the interview, or in other words, made accessible to the user. I'm just going to hit my enter key a couple of times. HotDocs ignores white space in scripts like this. And it's often helpful in different sections of a script to keep them separate with some space here. So I am now going to use some if logic. I could go down here and use the instruction model and continue to employ a drag and drop method, but I am just going to go ahead and type this in. And this is actually the same if logic that we have set up in fields in the template. In other words, this logic is going to leverage that separation true/false variable. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag that up and drop it right after the word if here. Then on the next line, I'm going to use what we call an ungray instruction. Again, I could go down here into the instruction models and do a drag and drop, or I could just type it out. If you're going to do the typing, you need to be careful you get the syntax exactly correct. Otherwise, of course, you'll encounter an error. But I'm going to put an ungray instruction here now, and I'm going to drag up the separation date variable, and then I'm going to tie all that off with an endif. Okay. Now, the effect in the interview, if I click on the update button here, is that this variable is now grayed out. But if I click on yes, it becomes available. So HotDocs is processing the if logic within the script now. The condition is met because I indicated that the separation variable has a true value, or I've answered this question yes, and that triggers the availability of this answer field now in the interview. Now, this is admittedly a little more involved in this case than simply going into component file properties and checking a box. But the advantage here is that you have full control over what's happening in a dialog. There may be certain situations in which you may want to ask questions at certain points in the interview, perhaps a comprehensive interview that's part of a document package, which we cover elsewhere, where you want to ask certain questions that may, technically speaking, be irrelevant at that point in time, but you still want to ask them at that particular point in the interview. When you check the automatically disable irrelevant variables and dialogues box in component file properties, you're giving HotDocs full control over that disabling behavior in the interview, which in some situations may incur unanticipated consequences. Here, though, you have full control over what's happening in a dialog if you employ a dialog script like this. Now, there are other things that you can do with dialog scripts. This is a very simple dialog script that we've implemented to gray out a question that might be irrelevant at certain points in time, and then telling HotDocs the condition under which we want to ungray it or make it available. There are other things you can do with dialog scripts, and we're going to cover those in the next video.